I fumbled with my keys, struggling to unlock the door while juggling my overflowing tote bag and suitcase. 3 days in Chicago for a client presentation, and I was beyond ready to be home. As the door finally clicked open, I stepped inside, already shrugging off my jacket and kicking off my shoes. Well, look who's back. The familiar smug voice made me freeze. I glanced up to find my cousin Elise lounging on my couch, one hand resting on her very pregnant belly. Her perfectly made-up face twisted into a satisfied smirk. "Elise, what the hell are you doing here?" I set down my bags, brow furrowing in confusion. She languidly stretched her arms over her head before replying, "I'm moving in, dear cousin, temporarily, of course." My mouth dropped open as I gaped at her. "You've got to be kidding me. Like hell you are." Elise let out a condescending laugh. "Oh, Rowan, always so dramatic. I've already cleared this with the family. You've got 2 weeks to move out and find a new place." The room began spinning as her words hit me. "Move out? This is my home that I worked my ass off for years to rent. What gives you the right?" "Family," Elise snapped, eyes flashing as she abruptly pushed herself up from the couch. "In case you've forgotten, blood is thicker than whatever alternative lifestyle you've chosen here. My baby needs a place to live, and your little singleton apartment is perfect." I clenched my fists, anger and disbelief churning inside me. First off, you don't get to judge my life choices. And second, I pay my rent here on time every month. What makes you think I'm just going to hand over my home because you show up pregnant and entitled? Elise clucked her tongue at me in a patronizing way that made my skin crawl. "Don't be difficult, Ro. Mom and Dad agree. You might be able to throw away family values for some big city fling, but I actually have responsibilities now as a mother." A mother, right, the baby. I glanced again at her protruding belly, unable to hide my skepticism and disgust. "You sure the kid is even yours? Or are you just looking for a handout as usual?" Her expression darkened at that. "How dare you, you smug, self-righteous little—" The apartment door flew open, cutting off her tirade. My jaw dropped for the second time as my parents hurried in, looking frazzled. "Rowan, Elise, we came as soon as we could," my mother fretted, shooting me a disapproving glare. "I should have known you two would be at each other's throats." My dad put a heavy hand on my shoulder, his tone grave. "This attitude of yours needs to stop, young lady. Your cousin needs support right now. She'll be staying here until she gets settled with the baby. You'll just have to make other arrangements for the next few weeks." I gaped back and forth between my parents and Elise. This was really happening. My own family betraying me on the word of Miss Manipulation herself. Elise shot me a triumphant look, all traces of anger replaced by smug satisfaction. "See, cuz? It's all settled. Now why don't you run along and start packing up your things?" For a long beat I could only stare at them, a storm of emotions raging inside. Shock, fury, resentment, disbelief. This was my home, my life that I had built through years of hard work and perseverance, and they were casually ripping it away with some misguided notion of family obligation. As the weight of their betrayal threatened to crush me, a familiar defiant spark flared inside my chest. Raising my chin, I returned Elise's smug look with newfound determination. "Don't get too comfortable," I promised in a low voice, "because you're not taking anything else away from me." After Elise's shocking announcement and my parents' misguided support for her scheme, I knew I needed to regroup and formulate a plan. But first, I wanted answers. The next morning, I marched straight to my parents' house, anger simmering inside me. My dad answered the door, his usual affable smile dimming when he saw the thunderous expression on my face. "Morning, Ro. Everything okay?" "Cut the crap, Dad," I said, brushing past him into the living room. "We need to talk about this Elise situation right now." My mom emerged from the kitchen, wringing a dish towel between her hands. "Rowan, please, there's no need for that tone." I rounded on her, nostrils flaring. "Excuse me? You two are enabling Elise's ridiculous power play, and I absolutely need an explanation." "Keep your voice down," my dad chided, casting a nervous glance towards the stairs as if we might wake the devil herself upstairs. "Your cousin is going through a difficult time." Letting out a hollow laugh, I shook my head incredulously. "Going through a difficult time? She's straight up lying and manipulating you. Don't you see what's happening?" "Now you listen here, young lady," my dad said sternly. "We're aware of Elise's past struggles. But she's brought a new life into this world, and it's time she grows up and takes responsibility. My mom nodded emphatically. Exactly. This baby is a beautiful blessing, and we need to support Elise through this transition to motherhood, even if that means making some personal sacrifices. The utter hypocrisy and delusion in their words made me want to scream. Instead, I pressed my lips together, reining in my anger as I studied their expressions. Deep down, I knew there was no reasoning with the two of them. Not right now. Elise's sob story and pregnancy had completely blinded them to her malicious intent. Unbelievable, I muttered, shaking my head slowly. Do you know how lucky that little parasite upstairs is right now? My mom's eyes widened at the insult, but I didn't give her a chance to object. She manages to snag herself a free ride by exploiting your old-fashioned family values, I sneered, making air quotes. What a conniving, selfish little... That's enough. My dad's booming voice cut me off. His face had flushed an angry red. I won't have you disrespecting your cousin like that in this house. We made our decision and you're just going to have to accept it. Staring back at their obstinate expressions, I knew continuing this argument would be futile. A bitter taste filled my mouth as I realized the full extent of Elise's betrayal. She hadn't just turned them against me. She'd blinded them through sheer deception. Well, two could play at that game. You're right, Dad, I said, my voice low and controlled now. I need to accept that my own family has turned their backs on me in favor of coddling a liar and a manipulator. My mom opened her mouth, undoubtedly to protest, but I didn't let her get a word out. But mark my words, I warned, holding up a finger. Elise hasn't won anything here. By the time I'm through exposing her for who she really is, she'll regret the day she thought she could take what's mine. Spinning on my heel, I stormed out of the suffocating house. The image of my parents' stunned faces burned into my mind. Let them dismiss my threats for now. They would soon realize I always made good on my promises. As I started my car and peeled away from the curb, only one thought echoed through my mind. Game on, Elise. See if you can slither your way out of this one. After my confrontation with my delusional parents, I was angrier than ever, but also motivated to take action against Elise. I couldn't let her smug, entitled act go unchallenged. She had crossed a line by manipulating my family so thoroughly. First things first, though, I needed to figure out temporary living arrangements while I executed my plan to take back my apartment. That night, over some greasy takeout and a bottle of wine, I rang up my best friend Kate to lay out the situation. That evil little gremlin! Kate fumed after I recapped the whole sordid tale. I can't believe she had the audacity to just roll up and take over your place like that. Believe it, I said darkly, taking another swig of Merlot. Especially when it comes to exploiting family ties for her own personal gain. Well, you can't let her get away with this, Kate insisted. We need to take her down, expose her for the lying snake she is. A feral smile tugged at my lips. Believe me, that's the plan. I'm going to make her regret the day she thought she could one-up me. Kate grinned, the scheming glint in her eye reassuring me I had an ally. Whatever you need, I'm here. My place is open to you too while we hatch this coup. Nodding, I felt some of the tension seep from my shoulders. Even though my own relatives had turned against me, Kate was solidly in my corner. That's what got me through the next couple of difficult weeks. I crashed at Kate's place while quickly seeking a short-term rental to keep my professional life on track. Meanwhile, I also set to work gathering ammunition to use against Elise. I knew from past experience that her sweet, helpless pregnant girl routine was a total act. She'd burned through family members' generosity more times than I could count, especially when it came to money lent, but never repaid. Using a few underhanded tricks of my own, I began quietly digging up financial records, ominous social media posts and texts, and other breadcrumb trails from her shady past. I also worked some contacts to uncover unsavory details about the absentee dad of her supposed miracle baby. By the time I was done, I had assembled a fairly damning record of Elise's selfish misdeeds and manipulative ways. It wasn't going to be pretty when I finally revealed it all to our family. One evening, while scrolling through the file I'd compiled on my laptop, a new idea sparked. I smirked as I imagined the look of smug disdain wiped clean off Elise's face. This was going to be deliciously satisfying. I quickly fired off a text to the family group chat. Important update from Rowan. Family meeting at Mom and Dad's place this Sunday at 3 p.m. Please make every effort to be there as this involves all of us. No excuses. The replies came tricking in, ranging from curious to dismissive, but I didn't care. By 3 o'clock this weekend, everything would be on the table, and Elise would learn an important lesson. Hell hath no fury like a woman whose home was stolen. Kate emerged from the kitchen, 2 fresh glasses of Merlot in hand. What's that conspiratorial smirk about? She asked, handing me a glass as she plopped down on the couch beside me. I turned the laptop so she could see the file I'd compiled, then showed her my call for a family meeting. Just putting the final stages in motion for Miss Elise's downfall. A slow smile spread across Kate's face as the realization dawned. You're just pure evil, you know that? I can't wait to see her sorry ass taken down a few pegs. Clinking my glass against Kate's, I savored the anticipation burning through me. Oh, believe me, this is just the beginning. By the time I'm done, Elise won't know what hit her. Showtime. I smoothed my hands over my black slacks, taking a deep, steadying breath as I eyed the door to my parents' house. All week, I had mentally prepared myself for this family meeting, rehearsing what I wanted to say and envisioning Elise's smug expression crumbling. Nothing was going to throw me off my game. Kate gave my arm a reassuring squeeze. You've got this. That witch doesn't stand a chance against all the receipts you've gathered. Thanks, I said with a tight smile. Her support bolstered my resolve. It was now or never to unveil Elise's deceptions. Squaring my shoulders, I rapped firmly on the door. It swung open a few moments later to reveal my dad. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Kate with me. Rowan. Kate. Come on in. Everyone's just settling in the living room. I strode inside, casting a sweeping glance over the assembled family. My mom sat primly on the couch next to a sprawling Elise, whose feet were propped up on the ottoman. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins filled out the remaining chairs, some with skeptical frowns, others wearing looks of curious anticipation. Elise arched one perfectly groomed eyebrow as I approached. Well, if it isn't the disgruntled host returning to crash our little family get-together. Her syrupy sweet tone dripped with disdain. Keeping my face impassive, I issued her a level look. Save the sugar-coated barbs, Elise. We both know this meeting has been a long time coming. Girls, please, my mom cut in, wringing her hands in distress. Can't we simply enjoy being together as a family without all this unpleasantness? Before she could go any further with the misguided peacekeeper act, I turned to address the whole room, raising my voice to be heard over any objections. I'm sure you're all wondering why I called this mandatory gathering today, I began, locking eyes with each bewildered relative. Well, it's because I have finally obtained proof that our dear Elise, I sent a mocking look her way, has been lying through her teeth this entire time about her situation. A hush fell over the room as I retrieved a thick manila folder from my bag. With methodical movements, I began distributing the contents around the room, printed out bank statements, screenshots of text conversations, even a few grainy photographs. As you can see, I said in a ringing tone, Elise has been far from honest about her financial woes, her so-called miracle pregnancy, and the guy who ran off as soon as he knocked her up. Wild murmurs began rippling through the room as every head bent over the paper trails I'd released. Elise's face had drained of color, giving her a sickly pallor. Lies! All vicious lies, meant to make me look bad, she sputtered, struggling to gain control of the situation. I simply shook my head, holding up a hand for silence that somehow worked. The evidence speaks for itself, cuzzo. Nice try, though, playing up the helpless single mom act to swindle my home out from under me. One by one, every head swiveled back to stare at Elise, newly enlightened by the secrets now aired out in the open. She squirmed under the weight of so many accusing gazes. In that moment, I could pinpoint the exact second when the stark reality hit her. The jig was up. She'd been caught red-handed manipulating our family's sympathies to fit her selfish agenda. A look of pure venom contorted her features as she shot me a murderous glare. You're going to regret this, she hissed, cradling her belly protectively. You have no idea what you've just done. An eager murmur coursed through the room, but I merely let out a hollow chuckle, holding Elise's fiery gaze steadily. Save the empty threats, sis. I'm not the one who messed up here. That was all you. This is just me finally setting things straight and getting back what's rightfully mine. By now, even my parents were sitting in stunned silence, seemingly shaken by the black and white proof of their daughter's deceit. Satisfaction washed over me as I sensed the power dynamic shifting completely in my favor. I'd played my trump card against Elise. Now she'd be forced to contend with the consequences of her own lies and manipulation. And this time, there was no avoiding the fallout. In the aftermath of my dramatic reveal at the family meeting, an unsettling quiet blanketed the living room. All eyes remained fixed on the now visibly shaken Elise, who kept shooting me murderous glares between whipping her head around at each accusing stare. "Well?" I prompted after several tense moments. "Any other lies or half-truths you want to come clean about while we're all here?" Elise opened her mouth but seemed unable to formulate a response. My mom leaned forward, resting a hand on her arm. "Elise, honey, please tell us this isn't all true," she implored in a sickly sweet tone that grated on me. "Rowan is just angry and lashing out. You would never deceive your own family." At that, Elise finally seemed to find her voice again, a hysterical edge creeping in. "Of course it's not true. Can't you see Rowan has clearly doctored or taken these things out of context? She's just bitter that I need some support right now with the baby coming." I scoffed loudly at that. "Need some support? Is that what you call shamelessly kicking me out of my own apartment under total false pretenses?" The accusing mutters grew louder around the room. Elise shot me another death glare. "Nobody is kicking you out permanently," she said with an air of self-righteousness that made my blood boil. "I just need a temporary place to stay until I get on my feet as a new mother. Is that really so unreasonable to ask of family?" I opened my mouth to retort, but my Uncle Steve beat me to it. "Wait, just a damn minute here," he cut in gruffly. "If what Rowan's showing us is true, which it sure as hell looks that way, then you've been lying through your teeth this whole time just to take advantage." Elise drew herself up straighter, lips pursing rebelliously. "Well, I never. Can it?" My cousin Jason piped up with unusual heat. Jabbing a finger at the photographs I'd handed out, he shook his head slowly. "Those pictures don't lie, Elle, and they sure as hell don't paint you as some helpless single mom just looking for a hand." A tense silence fell over the room as Elise's mouth cycled through opening and closing again futilely. My Aunt Monica cleared her throat uncomfortably. "I must say, I'm quite disturbed by these revelations as well. To deceive one's family in such a way—" She trailed off, shooting Elise a deeply disappointed look. One by one, nearly every face in the room morphed into identical masks of stern judgment and disbelief, aimed squarely at Elise. For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to feel a glimmer of triumph. Not only had I exposed her rotten scheme, but it seemed most of the family was finally viewing it for what it truly was, a bald-faced ploy by a con artist to exploit their kindness and loyalty. A nauseating gurgle of near-hysterical giggles bubbled up from Elise's throat as she eyed the courtroom of accusers surrounding her. Tears shone in her eyes, though I had a sinking suspicion they were more born of anger than remorse. "You outright refuse to help me when I've got nowhere else to turn? After everything, you'd really choose some self-centered brat over your own blood?" Her voice had taken on a dangerous, bitter edge that set me immediately on guard. Before any of us could react, Elise was on her feet, one hand braced on her lower back, while the other pointed an accusing finger straight at me. "Don't think for 1 second this is over, Rowan," she spat, lips peeling back in an ugly sneer. "If you thought I played dirty before, you've seen nothing yet. I'm not going away until I get what I need from this fucking family, and God help anyone who tries to stand in my way." With that ominous proclamation, she turned on her heel and waddled toward the front door, throwing it open. For a long beat she paused in the doorway, tossing one last withering glare over her shoulder. "I'll see you all in court," she hissed, before finally departing and letting the door slam shut with a resounding thud behind her. The silence that followed her dramatic exit was deafening. I slowly let out the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, adrenaline thrumming through me. Whatever came next, one thing was now abundantly clear. The grudging respect from some family members wasn't worth the dangerous new enemy I just made of my own flesh and blood. Over the next few days, an uneasy truce settled over the family in the wake of Elise's dramatic exit. Most weren't willing to take sides outright, but a definite rift had formed between those stunned by her deception and those still in denial about her motives. As for me, I simply bided my time while casting furtive glances over my shoulder. Elise's ominous parting words had put me on edge, knowing her vindictive nature. I made sure to alert my landlord to the situation in case she tried anything underhanded regarding my lease. Nearly a week after the confrontation, I returned home from an errand to find the lights on in my apartment despite me turning them off earlier. Heart pounding, I quietly stepped inside, ears pricked for any sounds of an intruder. Going somewhere? I nearly jumped out of my skin at the biting voice that sliced through the silence. There in my living room, perched on my couch with a glass of wine in hand, was Elise. "What the hell are you doing here?" I growled, adrenaline thrumming as I registered her smug look. She arched one plucked eyebrow coolly. "No need to get all worked up, Ro. I'm simply here to talk before this situation gets any more out of hand." A disbelieving laugh ripped from my throat as I gaped at her audacity. "You have some nerve showing up here unannounced after the twisted crap you pulled." Rising to her feet with obvious effort, Elise wobbled slightly before finding her balance. "Like I said, let's talk this through rationally. Despite our differences, we're still family." Her tone dripped with sugary sweet reasonability that made me want to vomit. Squaring my shoulders, I stared her down unflinchingly. "I'm done playing your mind games, Elise. If you think for 1 second I'm backing down or letting you slither your way back in here, you're sorely mistaken." Her lips curved in a vindictive smile. "We'll see about that. But first, I want you to know exactly what you've done by turning the family against me." With a dramatic flourish, Elise plucked a folded piece of paper from her pocket and began reading aloud in a cold, even tone. "I can't keep living like this, feeling like a constant burden and disappointment to everyone around me. The cruel words and accusations have become too much." It took me a few seconds to register the alarming words as my heart plummeted. "Elise, what the hell is that?" She silenced me with a look before continuing in that haunting monotone. "Maybe once the baby is born, things will be different. But for now, the only merciful path is to—" "Enough!" I roared, stomach churning. Recognition was slowly dawning, despite my mind's refusal to accept the awful implication behind her words. My gaze fell on the prominent swell of her belly, nausea gripping me. Elise folded up the note with a look of mock solemnity. "A friend of mine found this in my bathroom trash after one of my darker moments. I'd meant to discard it, but she saved me from making a terrible mistake that night." For a long beat, I simply stared at her, dumbfounded by the new depths of manipulation she was stooping to. Finally finding my voice, I responded in a hoarse rasp. "You're lying. You don't have a single selfless bone in your body. There's no way you'd ever actually consider—" "Hurting my unborn child?" Elise's eyes flashed dangerously as she finished my sentence for me. "You're right. It would be unthinkable. But that's how low your vindictive crusade against me has driven your own cousin Rowan." "That's not true." I exploded, panic and anger swirling together in a volatile mix. "I never wanted to push you to that point. I was just what?" She cut me off icily. "Ruthlessly exposing my flaws and insecurities to everyone? Destroying any chance I had for a stable home for my baby?" My mouth opened and closed uselessly, all righteous indignation failing me. Elise nodded slowly, expression grave. "Yes, that's what I thought. Well, I sincerely hope you can live with that on your conscience." She cradled her swollen belly protectively. "For my child's sake, I have to put some distance between us. But this isn't over, Rowan. Not by a long shot." With that, she brushed past me toward the door, leaving me rooted in place and utterly stricken. What game was she playing at now? More to the point, how goddamn far was she truly willing to go? My hands clenched into tight fists as her ploy started sinking in, using her pregnancy as some twisted bargaining chip against me. I couldn't let her continue manipulating me like this. As the apartment door swung shut behind Elise, a single thought crystallized in my mind with decisive clarity. It was time to go scorched earth on my cousin's cruel mind games once and for all. After Elise's latest twisted performance in my apartment, I knew I couldn't let her shocking theatrics rattle me. She was becoming increasingly unhinged and desperate, probably because on some level she realized the jig was truly up this time. With Kate's help venting out my anger and disbelief over a couple bottles of wine, I regained my determination. Elise's manipulative schemes had gone far enough. It was time to hit her where it really hurt, her victimized public image. The next morning, I printed out a copy of her ludicrous suicide note and texted the family group chat. Since Elise seems so concerned about her well-being being impacted, I want to make sure you all see the latest evidence of how far she's willing to go for attention and pity. This was her latest ploy to guilt-trip me into submission after her other cons were exposed last week. I attached the file and sent it off, letting the words linger ominously as the implication sank in. Sure enough, the replies came swiftly. Oh my God, is this for real? Elise. Honey, what were you thinking? You can't be serious right now, Ro. This is taking things too far. I allowed the mixture of shock, skepticism, and condemnation to swell for a few minutes before adding my own response. I'm deadly serious. After Elise was caught lying and shown the evidence, she came barging into my apartment trying to emotionally manipulate me into surrendering with this garbage suicide script. Needless to say, it didn't work. My phone started blowing up with a barrage of new messages ranging from horrified to outright scathing towards Elise's actions. Smiling tightly, I knew my point had landed. There was no salvaging her stance as a helpless victim after this latest gambit. She had finally burned through any residual benefit of the doubt. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Frowning, I set down my phone and strode over to answer it. My jaw dropped when I found Elise standing on my doorstep, eyes red-rimmed from apparent crying. She clutched her phone in one hand with a white-knuckled grip. What the actual did you just do? The seething whisper that emerged was laced with pure venom. I arched an eyebrow coolly. Oh good, you got my group text. I figured it was time for a little truth, considering all your deranged lying. Elise's nostrils flared as her shoulders heaved with unchecked rage. You evil little You've completely destroyed me. With that, she hurled her phone straight at me with startling force. I barely had time to flinch before the screen shattered against my forehead, shards of glass slicing into my skin. A cry of pain escaped my lips as I stumbled back, hands flying to clutch at the bloody gash now seeping crimson. Whoa, Elise! Kate's shout rang out from somewhere behind us on the sidewalk before she came charging over. Elise twisted around, eyes wild and fists clenched like she was ready to throw down. Kate immediately inserted herself between us, shooting her an incredulous glare. Get the hell out of here before I call the cops! She spat at the clearly unhinged woman. You're insane! For a long moment, the two of them faced off as I clutched my bloody forehead and struggled not to pass out from the pain and shock. Finally, Elise seemed to catch herself, recoiling as if suddenly realizing the severity of her actions. Without a word, she whipped around and stalked towards her car parked haphazardly in my building's lot, throwing herself into the driver's seat. I watched through a haze as she peeled out recklessly onto the main street before disappearing around the corner. Jesus H. Christ, Kate breathed out, turning back to examine my injury with a grimace. Your cousin has officially gone bonkers. You okay? I nodded weakly, hand clamped tightly over the still-flowing wound. Yeah, I'm all right, but Elise has clearly crossed about a dozen lines back there. Kate let out a disbelieving chuckle as she guided me back towards my apartment. You think? I don't care how hormonal or pissed she is, that chick is off her rocker. She paused, giving me an appraising look. Still, I'm sensing you feel like you've gotten through to her in some weird way? A grim smile tugged at my lips behind my hand as the pieces started falling into place. Oh, I'm done trying to talk reason into that snake, but you're right. I think Elise just got the very loud and clear message that it's time to back off. My eyes narrowed as I reflected on her breakdown. While frightening, it also proved my point. I had finally cut through all her manipulation and lies and exposed the twisted person beneath. The violent outburst was her unstable mask cracking wide open. Whether the rest of my family wanted to accept it or not, Elise had revealed her true, toxic colors, and there was no going back to her innocent victim act after this. I only hoped this was the dramatic climax before I could finally get my life back. Little did I know, Elise still had one more sinister gambit to play. In the aftermath of Elise's explosive confrontation at my apartment, an uneasy calm settled over the next few weeks. To the family's credit, most of them seemed to finally grasp how unhinged and toxic her behavior had become. The damning, fake suicide note file I circulated was apparently the tipping point that dissolved any remaining sympathy. My Aunt Monica was the first to reach out, inviting me over for a long overdue heart-to-heart. I can't begin to find the words to apologize for enabling Elise's deception for as long as we did, she said, eyes downcast with shame. Your parents are still struggling to accept the dark reality, but I saw the truth for what it was. I nodded slowly, appreciating her remorse, even if it came late. I only wish it hadn't taken such an ugly wake-up call. What Elise tried to pull with that suicide manipulation, it was a new low, even for her. Monica's face hardened as she gave a grim nod. Clearly the girl has suffered some sort of break from reality. As disturbing as it is, it does provide a perspective on how dangerous her mindset has become. We lapsed into a pensive silence, both of us ruminating on the emotional turmoil that had engulfed the family ever since Elise's sudden appearance at my doorstep, pregnant and demanding refuge. Finally, I cleared my throat. Well, I suppose now it's up to me to try and move forward, however I can, with or without the family's full understanding. Monica reached over and gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. You have more support than you know, my dear. Elise's twisted games have opened many eyes that were too long willfully blinded before. Just take care of yourself first and foremost. Her words proved to be sage advice over the following weeks and months, as I slowly rebuilt my sense of peace and equilibrium. With Elise outwardly backing off, at least for the time being, I plunged myself into work commitments to re-establish a sense of normalcy. Of course, the process wasn't seamless. I still jumped at unexpected noises, always half bracing for another one of Elise's vindictive ploys to manifest without warning. And haunting reminders of her betrayal lingered in various ways. My external hard drive containing years of treasured photos had somehow gone missing from my apartment. Termites had inexplicably infested my dining room table, destroying the sentimental peace. But I refused to let her pettiness and toxic trail of destruction derail me entirely. Each time Kate and I uncovered another missing belonging or damaged memento, we'd simply roll our eyes and press on. Girl is lucky this is all the payback she's getting after what she tried to pull, Kate remarked one night as we carried the sawdust remains of my table out to the curb. I snorted, hoisting my end higher with a grunt. Trust me, I've thought about taking her crazy ass to court more times than I can count at this point. But I honestly just want to purge her from my life and move on. Kate eyed me approvingly. Spoken like someone refusing to stay stuck as the victim anymore. That's the attitude, Ro. Take back your power. I smiled tightly, appreciating her unshakable loyalty more than I could say. With Kate's stalwart encouragement, I slowly reclaimed my sense of self-worth and redefined my perspective. Instead of dwelling on Elise's rampant toxicity that had brought so much turmoil and suffering, I chose to appreciate the increased self-assurance and conviction I developed in standing up for myself. I was no longer the passive, unassertive girl who got steamrolled and dismissed by manipulative relatives. I had staked a clear claim to my identity, woven from resilience, integrity, and the knowledge of how to firmly enforce my boundaries when violated. Glancing around my cozy apartment one morning a few months later, I felt a sense of hard-won serenity wash over me. All of Elise's scorched earth attempts to destabilize my world had failed to fully shake the foundation I had reinforced for myself. I was bruised and battered, yes, but not broken. As for what further drama might arise regarding her future machinations, well, I'd simply have to cross that bridge when I came to it. But this time, I wasn't the same idle passenger, just watching her disrupt everything in her wake. No, from here on out, she would be dealing with a battle-tested, self-possessed woman who was done playing games or placating toxic manipulation in the name of family. My newfound strength and resilience were here to stay, and God help anyone who tried to overstep those ironclad boundaries again.
I'm Rachel, and I want to take you back to a bright Sunday that didn't start out any different, but ended up being the day that completely altered my life. It was one of those days that you hope will go unnoticed, but it lingers with you forever. A range of emotions swept over me as soon as I drew up to my brother James's house. Although I was anxious to see everyone, I was also a little excited. I was excited to catch up with my family because it had been a while since we had all been together. I also had some great news to share. After much effort, I had recently been hired as a manager at a prestigious marketing company. I had a ton of packages of chips and homemade salsa in my 1998 black vehicle. It was undoubtedly ugly in comparison to the other automobiles in the driveway, but at least it was mine and I had paid for it. What mattered was that it got me where I needed to go. James was there to welcome me with a smile as soon as I got out of the vehicle. "Hi, Jules." He joked. "We were beginning to think you bailed on us." As I passed the treats over, I giggled. Never. Despite the terrible traffic, I made it. As soon as we entered the backyard, I could smell hamburgers cooking on the grill. James's wife, Mary, was standing on the terrace when I noticed her. It seemed as though she had just walked out of a fashion magazine. She was wearing an enormous pair of expensive sunglasses and the ideal summer outfit. She was usually able to draw attention, and today was no exception. My siblings, Michael and Amy, were busy putting up some outside activities, while my parents were at the grill waving as they turned the burgers. Everything appeared ideal, as was typical of family get-togethers. Naturally, Mary had to make her appearance. "The honored guest has finally arrived." Mary yelled out in a voice so loud that she made sure everyone could hear her, including the neighbors. Her gaze flickered to my blue vintage automobile that was parked next to their brand-new, gleaming SUV as she was saying this. "Jules, couldn't you just park that antique around the block? It ruins my perspective." My cousins laughed a little, and I attempted to laugh it off. I tried not to let that get to me, but I said, "Well, it gets me from point A to point B." Mary, though, wasn't done. She let out a loud sigh and took a drink of her beverage. "You really ought to treat yourself to something finer, honey. You two realize that you're a manager now. You ought to behave accordingly." I opened my mouth to reply, eager to tell her how happy I was about the new job, but Mary had already turned away. She was totally ignoring me and assembling a bunch of people for a game. I stood there for a while, the hurt of her words still fresh. The way she said it served as a reminder that, in her opinion, no matter what I accomplished, I would never be enough. It wasn't just about the automobile. I looked across the yard at James, who gave me a pitying shrug and mouthed, "Don't let her get to you." I made an effort to grin back, but it was difficult to get over the sense of denigration. Like other barbecues, the day consisted of games, socializing, and family catch-up. I made an effort to have fun, but Mary's remark was all I could think about. She had made me feel insignificant before, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. It was more about the unsaid rivalry we appeared to have all the time, which served as a constant reminder of my place in her world, than it was about the automobile. The discourse was easy to follow as we all sat down to dine. Everyone was exchanging life updates, including news about their families and new employment. During my turn, I broke the exciting news about my recent employment. The family thanked me, and I received a few inquiries about the work. But just when I thought I had the limelight, Mary stole it by highlighting her own function at a comparable firm and making it appear as though my accomplishment was little in comparison to hers. She had no idea that I was going to do something much more significant, something that would completely alter her life. However, I wasn't going to wait for her to sabotage the moment. Mary grinned as she leaned over to say, "So, Rachel, this new job must be a big step up from your old one, huh?" as we were all seated around the table enjoying the dinner. "Hopefully they're paying you enough to upgrade that car soon," she said, chuckling a bit. She gave James a little shove, obviously enjoying her remark. Just as I opened my mouth to reply, my mother interrupted. "Everyone is so happy for Rachel." She expressed her delight in her job by saying, "She's worked really hard for this," grinning warmly. I was unable to get rid of the tension that was simmering just beneath the surface, even though the rest of the lunch was filled with laughing and family anecdotes. Despite being uttered with a grin, Mary's remark had hurt. I couldn't help but feel irritated by her constant ability to poke fun at me for the whole evening. People started saying their goodbyes as the sun started to drop. While I assisted with cleanup, I continued to consider Mary's conceit and tried to get over my anxiety about beginning my new work on Thursday. As I approached my new office's sleek glass building on Thursday morning, my nerves were shot. Nervous moments accompany new experiences, but this was beyond compare. I wasn't only beginning a new career. I was taking on a supervisory position at one of the city's leading marketing companies. My stomach churned with a mixture of exhilaration and worry as the pressure seemed unbelievably high. The receptionist smiled warmly at me as soon as I walked in. "Good morning, Rachel. You can enter the upstairs now." As I made my way to the elevator, I tried to calm myself by taking a big breath. There was cheers when the elevator doors opened. My new colleagues was there grinning broadly and cheering as they welcomed me. A portion of the anxiety that had been accumulating was released during what seemed like a bizarre moment. Mr. David, the director, came forward and gave me a hard handshake. He declared, "Let's all formally welcome Rachel as your new project manager." The room buzzed with excitement, and I felt a rush of pride. But then my eyes landed on Mary. She was clapping along with everyone else, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Her applause was slow and hesitant, and I could see the shock on her face. It was clear she hadn't known until that moment that I would be her new boss. After the introductions, Mary approached me with a tight, forced smile. "Let's catch up after this, Rachel," she said, trying to sound cheerful, but there was an edge of surprise in her voice. "Sure, let's do that," I replied, keeping my voice calm and composed, though inside my emotions were swirling. I couldn't help but feel a bit of satisfaction seeing Mary in this position after her comments at the barbecue. Once the meeting ended and people returned to their desks, Mary lingered. She walked toward me, her usual confidence clearly shaken. "Rachel, about the barbecue, I hope there are no hard feelings," she said, her voice much softer than usual. It was a far cry from the bold, smug Mary I was used to. I looked at her, keeping my expression professional. "Mary, let's keep our focus on work. Personal matters stay outside these walls," I replied, giving her a polite but distant smile. "Of course, Rachel." "You're right," Mary nodded, though her eyes darted away, unable to fully hide the unease she felt. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my new role. I spent hours reviewing project files and performance reports, trying to get up to speed as quickly as possible. One thing became clear: Mary's work required special attention. There were inconsistencies in her project timelines and budget allocations that didn't quite add up. I knew I had to address it sooner rather than later. During one of our one-on-one meetings, I decided to bring it up directly. "Mary, I've noticed some discrepancies in the Smith account. Can you walk me through your process here?" I asked, keeping my tone calm and professional. Mary hesitated for a moment, clearly caught off guard. "Sure," she replied, but I could see the unease in her eyes. It was going to be an interesting road ahead, managing both the professional challenges and the personal dynamics at play. But I was ready for it. This was my time to prove myself, and I wasn't about to let anything or anyone, including Mary, get in my way. Mary gave a nervous laugh, fidgeting with her pen. I mean, it's probably just some small oversights. You know how it is with tight deadlines, she said, trying to brush off the issue. I looked at her calmly but firmly. Minor or not, accuracy is important, Mary. We can't afford any mistakes, especially with such important clients. Let's go through this together, okay? My tone left little room for excuses, and Mary quickly nodded. Yes, absolutely. I'll pull up the details now, she said, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed on her keyboard. As we went through the files, it became obvious that Mary had been cutting corners. Her work barely met the minimum standard, and the more we reviewed, the more gaps we found. I made sure to take notes on everything, documenting every oversight in detail. I knew this would come up again in future meetings, and I needed to be prepared for it. In our next meeting, I laid out the evidence in front of her. Mary, based on these reviews, it's clear that there are consistent issues with your work. These oversights need to be fixed immediately. Mary's face tightened, but she nodded. I understand, Rachel. I'll make sure to tighten things up. Thanks for pointing these out, she said, her voice a mixture of gratitude and discomfort. I nodded, my tone firm. Let's make sure it doesn't happen again. Our clients and our team are counting on us to be diligent. As Mary left my office, I could see the weight of the situation finally sinking in. For me, it was about making sure our work remained up to standard. But deep down, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. In a way, it felt like justice was being served, and I knew Mary had a lot to prove going forward. The following Thursday, the stakes were even higher, not just for me, but for Mary too. It was her chance to show what she could really do. She walked into the office, clutching her oversized designer bag and a stack of files. Her heels clicked on the polished floor as she made her way to my office. Got a minute? I called out, motioning her inside. My tone was serious but calm. Sure, she replied, smoothing down her blouse before sitting across from me. I'm putting you in charge of the Henderson project, I said, laying out the project details in front of her. It's not a huge project, but it's an important one. This is your chance to show what you're capable of. Mary's eyes widened slightly, a mix of nervousness and excitement flashing across her face. Really? I mean, thank you, Rachel. I won't let you down. I nodded, watching her closely. I'll be guiding you through it, but I want to see what you can do when you're leading the project. The next few days were intense. I kept a close eye on her progress, checking in regularly. We had frequent meetings, and I made sure to document every decision and approval. At first, Mary was enthusiastic, throwing herself into the project, but as the pressure mounted, her energy started to wane. During one of our strategy sessions, I noticed her struggling. Mary, during our last review, you mentioned outsourcing some of the graphics work. Have you properly vetted the vendor? I asked, trying to get a clear answer. Oh yeah, they're fine, Mary replied quickly, clearly trying to move past the question. I mean, it should be okay. I raised an eyebrow, not satisfied with her response. It's important that they're more than just okay. Can you show me the vetting process you used? Mary paused, realizing she hadn't done the proper work. Her confidence faltered, and I could see that the stress was getting to her. This wasn't just about doing the minimum anymore. It was about stepping up and proving that she could handle the responsibility. As the project continued, I pushed her to meet the high standards we needed. It wasn't easy, but I could tell Mary was learning. Mistakes were still made, but each time she corrected them faster. Watching her work under pressure, I realized that while she had a long way to go, she was starting to take the job more seriously. By the end of the project, I could see a change in Mary. She wasn't the same overconfident, carefree person from before. She had been humbled by the experience, and while there was still room for improvement, I knew she was on the right path. I pressed on, knowing that any mistake now would be officially noted. Mary fumbled through her files, her usual confidence slipping away. "I'll get that information to you by the end of the day," she stammered. "I just didn't bring the paperwork with me right now." The days stretched into weeks, and the project deadline loomed closer. In a team meeting, it was finally Mary's turn to present her progress. The room was full, and the air was thick with anticipation. Mary stood at the front, holding her report, but her usual poise was gone. She seemed unsettled, her confidence nowhere in sight. "All right, let's see," she began, flipping through her notes. "For the marketing strategy, we are, planning to..." Her words trailed off, and she stumbled over her sentences. The report lacked the depth and clarity that was expected, and I could sense the tension rising in the room. Mr. David, who was seated in the corner, raised his eyebrows slightly and gave me a nod, signaling his concern. This was the moment I had been waiting for. "Mary," I interjected, "could you clarify how the budget was allocated? There seemed to be some discrepancies between your report and the original estimates." Her face turned red as she shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I had to make some last-minute changes, and the costs, well, they kind of got away from me." "I see," I said, keeping my tone calm but firm. "It's crucial that we stick to the planned budget, especially when dealing with new clients. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again." I glanced around the room and could see the concern on my team members' faces. It was important for everyone to learn from this, not just Mary. As the meeting ended, the team shuffled out, and murmurs about the project status filled the room. Mary lingered behind, her defeat evident. Her usual confidence had crumbled, and I could see the weight of the situation settling on her. "Rachel," she said quietly as she approached me. "I tried to handle it, but I don't know what went wrong." I looked at her, my tone firm but not harsh. "Managing projects is about oversight and adaptability, Mary. We need to discuss how we can fix this." Mary nodded, agreeing to meet with me later to work through the issues. I could tell she was embarrassed, but this was more than just her failure. It was about maintaining a high standard for the entire team. I documented everything carefully, noting the issues in her work. It was clear to everyone now that her mismanagement had caused problems, but I wasn't happy about her struggle. It wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting the company and our clients. Upholding professional standards was key. The day after that rough meeting, the office was unusually quiet. As I made my way to my desk, I could hear whispers behind me. People were talking about what had happened. Mary was pacing near the water cooler and intercepted me before I could even sit down. "This was a setup, wasn't it?" she accused, her voice full of tension and confusion. "You've been out to get me from the start." I stood my ground and met her gaze. "I gave you an opportunity, Mary," I said evenly. "The outcome was in your hands, not mine." Mary looked frustrated, her anger barely contained. I understood that she was upset, but her accusation wasn't fair. She had been given every chance to succeed, and the decisions she made were her own. I wasn't here to sabotage her. I was here to make sure the job was done right. She paused for a moment, her face softening as the reality of the situation sank in. "I didn't mean for things to go this way," she muttered, her voice quieter now. "I know," I replied, "but this is about more than just one project. It's about learning from mistakes and improving. We can't afford to let this happen again." Mary nodded, finally understanding the gravity of the situation. She had to take responsibility for her actions, and I hoped this would be a turning point for her. This wasn't about tearing her down. It was about making sure she grew from the experience. We all had to be accountable, and I knew that if she took this lesson to heart, She could turn things around. I stayed calm and measured, even as Mary's tone grew more emotional. "But you just watched me fail," she said, her voice shaking with desperation. "You could have helped more. You could have guided me." "Helping is one thing," I replied, "but doing your job for you is another. We all have to meet the company's standards. Unfortunately, your work didn't meet those expectations." She scoffed, throwing her hands up in frustration. "So that's it. You're just going to watch me go down." "It's not about watching you fail, Mary. I document everyone's performance. It's my job, and it's not personal," I said, trying to stay firm yet professional. Later that afternoon, Mr. David called both of us into his office. The tension in the air was thick as Mary, and I sat across from him. He laid out the papers I had prepared: mismanaged budgets, unvetted vendors, and timeline issues. After reviewing the evidence and considering Rachel's observations, he said, "We've decided it's best for the company that we part ways with you, Mary." Strongly, Mr. David said. As the decision's reality sunk in, Mary's face became pale and the blaze in her eyes subsided. "I comprehend," she said, her voice almost discernible. The word of Mary's dismissal got around fast. There was something off about the vibe during the next family get-together. I was making myself a coffee when my brother James came over. I am aware of the difficulties. "Jules, are you okay?" he said, clearly showing worry. "I fulfilled my obligation, James. It was about honesty, not retaliation," I remarked, understanding the gravity of the issue. He offered me a comforting touch on the shoulder and nodded. "I know, sis, and I believe that everyone else knows it as well, deep down." Our parents, who are always encouraging, kept quiet about Mary's disappearance. Rather of concentrating on splitting up the family, they tried to lighten the mood of the evening. The tension that had been present earlier gradually subsided as the laughter and talk continued. Afterwards, I had some time to think as I drove home to the sound of my old automobile. As the streetlights flickered by, I pondered about all that had transpired. Making difficult decisions for my work affected not just myself, but also everyone around me. I understood it was my responsibility to maintain professional standards, even if I hadn't intended to harm Mary directly. That required making tough choices, even when they affected relatives. Even though those decisions seemed like a lot, I continued driving because I knew that I had performed my duties honestly and fairly. With the most important values guiding me, the path ahead seemed more apparent. That concludes our tale. How do you feel? Was Rachel correct in the way she resolved Mary's situation? Did she make the correct decision by adhering to her professional responsibilities, or should she have offered greater encouragement? Please share your opinions in the comments section below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to our posts for more like it. Before I begin telling you my tale, I'm Lily. Please remember to like and subscribe so you can hear more about how I handled one of the most trying nights of my life. I am here to relate this story that utterly changed my world upside down. I appreciate you coming here to hear me out. It was supposed to be a beautiful evening when it all began. The purpose of the evening was to host a celebration at Mrs. Thomas's opulent residence. Her home looked exquisite, with large crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and filling the entire space with a lovely, cozy light. The exquisite china on the dinner table shone in the warm glow of the lights, giving the impression that it had been put up from out of an upscale store. I was really looking forward to it since it was the sort of family meal when everyone was meant to have fun. I had amazing news to report. I just received a promotion at work, which I found to be rather significant. After years of arduous labor in my marketing career, I felt that I had achieved a great deal with my promotion to senior marketing director. I can still picture myself taking a big breath, checking that my outfit was wrinkle-free, and stepping in front of the mirror. I was prepared to inform everyone and anticipated their happiness on my behalf. I thought of cheers, grins, and perhaps even a celebratory toast. I was excited to deliver my news, but also scared as we began to eat the appetizers. "I have some great news to share," I whispered to my spouse, Adam, who was seated next to me. He nodded and smiled encouragingly, signaling that I should have said something. I then exhaled deeply, turned to face the other members of the family, and grinned broadly said, "I've been promoted to Senior Marketing Director." But instead of the roars of approval and joy I had anticipated, the audience became quiet. Everyone stopped smiling and simply stared at me. Adam's mother, Mrs. Thomas, who sat at the other end of the table, pushed her lips firmly together in a thin line of disdain and narrowed her eyes at me. With a voice barely audible to me, she moved closer to Adam and growled, "Is this what we brought him up for? To be eclipsed in prominence by his spouse's work?" Her remark sliced like a dagger through me. I looked to Adam, expecting him to defend me, but he appeared to cower in the face of his mother's stare. His hand beneath the table that had been clutching mine slowly withdrew, and the encouraging grin he had given me seconds before vanished. In an attempt to lighten the mood and salvage the moment, I grinned and remarked, "Adam, this is a fantastic chance for us. The rise is substantial and will benefit us much." But before I could say anything further, Mrs. Thomas cut me off with the question, "What about starting a family, Willie? Your voice is sharp and full of judgment. Are you actually of the opinion that having children brings more joy than money?" Her remark struck a chord with me, and before I could reply, Adam, who had not spoken yet, spoke out. He had become extremely cold-voiced, more so than I had ever heard. "When do you intend to slow down and become a family man?" "Lily," he said, "this profession is not everything." I was taken aback. Not only did the words break my heart, but I also sensed a betrayal in Adam's voice. This was the man who had always backed me throughout my career, and had always been proud of me, and now he was standing with his mother against me. I answered, shaking my head, "I thought you were proud of me." The main course was served by now, but the festive mood of the previous evening had vanished. Though the subjects of conversation at the table changed, the tension persisted and lingered in the air like a dense fog. The tension between Adam, his mother, and I simmered even more than the roast beef on our plates. The more the evening wore on, the more antagonistic Adam's conduct grew. Like his mother, there was disdain in every look and every word. I couldn't understand why the individuals who ought to have been the most supportive were the ones making me feel inadequate. It felt like they were working together against me. Then something that will always stick in my memory happened right before dessert was delivered. Adam sprang out of his seat when the server delivered a gorgeous slice of cake in front of me. With a loud thud, he snatched his napkin and hurled it upon the table. Everyone looked at him, startled by his unexpected outburst. "You ought to be aware of your position, Lily," he murmured, resonating across the dining area. "You're my wife, not my competitor." I sat there in shock as his words seemed to linger in the air. The previously warm glow of the chandeliers has left the space feeling chilly and uninviting. With my heart pounding, I got up and attempted to control my breathing. "I don't have to give up on my aspirations because I'm your wife, Adam." I answered forcefully, my voice trembling a little but full of resolve. "I deserve respect, not this." Adam had a transformation at that very moment. He lifted his hand before I could respond, and then with a rapid flash that would linger in my dreams for years, he hit me across the face. Everyone in the room froze in place as the harsh sound of the slap reverberated through the space. I raised a quivering palm to my cheek and felt the sting of anguish travel over my face as the room went silent. There was silence at the table as everyone's wide, shocked, and disbelieving eyes were riveted on me. I remained silent as well. Rather, I carefully pivoted and pushed my chair back. The sound of the chair's legs scraping the hardwood floor was so loud that it seemed to pierce the quiet. My thoughts racing, I started toward the entryway, keeping my stride steady. The sound of my heels hitting the marble floor was the only thing I could hear, like the steady beat of a drum marking my escape. I reached for my purse without glancing back, not even once. I didn't need to. I already knew what was behind me. My marriage, my life with Adam, was over. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my skin, and I closed the door softly behind me. The quiet click of the door closing felt like the final punctuation on this chapter of my life. It was over. My marriage was over. In that moment, standing outside in the dark, cool night, I knew I had to leave. I had to find a place where my ambitions weren't seen as something to be ashamed of, where I could breathe freely and finally be myself again. For too long, I had lived in the shadow of someone else's expectations. Now it was time to step out of that shadow and find my own way. As I drove away, I watched the house grow smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror, a strange mix of fear and relief swirling inside me. I was truly alone for the first time in a long time, but there was something else too, something new. A spark of hope, a sense of freedom. It was small, but it was there, flickering inside me like a light that had just been lit. I knew this was the beginning of a new journey, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. The next morning, I woke up in my small apartment, sunlight streaming through the windows. It felt like the first day of a new life, like everything had changed overnight. The events of the previous night still felt fresh in my mind, and yet at the same time, they seemed distant, almost like they had happened to someone else. My phone buzzed with messages, friends reaching out after hearing whispers about what had happened. Messages of concern, confusion, and questions filled my screen, but I ignored them. I couldn't focus on explaining myself right now. There were more important things I needed to take care of. The first thing I did was pick up the phone and call the divorce attorney I had been recommended. My hand shook slightly as I dialed the number, but I was determined. When the attorney answered, I didn't hesitate. "I need to file for divorce," I said, my voice strong. "It's urgent." The attorney's response was calm and professional. "Understood," they said. "I'll prepare the initial paperwork. Can you come in this afternoon to go over the details?" "Yes, I'll be there," I replied. After hanging up the phone, I felt a small victorious thrill. There was no turning back now. The decision had been made, and I was taking the steps. I needed to move forward at work. I tried to focus, though my mind kept wandering back to everything that had happened. My boss, Mr. Brandon, noticed my distraction and approached me with a concerned look. "Everything all right, Lily?" he asked gently. "I'm dealing with some personal issues, but I'll manage." "Thank you," I replied, trying to sound composed. "If you need time off, just let me know," he offered. "No, I'd rather keep busy. It helps," I said, giving him a small smile. He nodded in understanding. "Well, let me know if you need anything." "Thank you," I said, grateful for his kindness. As I returned to my work, I couldn't help but feel that despite the chaos in my personal life, I was taking control. The steps I was taking were difficult, but they were necessary. It was the start of something new, and while I didn't know exactly where this new path would take me, I was ready to find out. I threw myself into my work, finding comfort in the familiar tasks that helped keep my mind off everything going on in my personal life. The routine of my job was a welcome distraction, and my coworkers were incredibly supportive, which made it easier to breathe, even when the weight of my marriage falling apart felt overwhelming. "Hey Lily, I heard about last night. Are you okay?" Mary, one of my closest friends at work, asked me, her voice filled with concern. "It's been tough, Mary," I admitted, trying to keep my voice steady, "but I'll get through it." Mary gave me a reassuring smile. "You're stronger than you think. If you ever need a place to crash or just hang out, my door is always open. Don't hesitate to reach out." "Thanks, Mary," I said, feeling grateful for her kindness. "I might take you up on that." "How about drinks after work?" My treat, she offered, flashing me a grin. I smiled back. "That sounds perfect." Later that evening, over drinks, Mary and I talked about everything. I poured out my heart to her, sharing the details of my crumbling marriage and the emotional roller coaster I had been on. Despite all the turmoil and uncertainty, I found moments of relief in our conversation. Mary's presence and our laughter, even if just for a few hours, helped me feel like things would be okay. When I finally returned to my apartment, I checked my phone and saw several missed calls from Adam. My heart sank as I debated whether or not to call him back. After thinking it over, I decided not to. Instead, I sent him a text message that I knew I needed to send. "I filed for divorce. Please respect my space during this time." I typed and hit send. His reply came almost instantly. It was full of desperation. "Can we talk about this, please? I didn't mean it. Lily, I'm sorry." I stared at his message for a moment, my emotions swirling. I knew what I needed to say. "I need space, Adam. Good night." I replied, keeping my response firm but brief. As I put my phone away, I felt a wave of mixed emotions wash over me. Sadness, relief, anger, and something else, determination. I was free now, or at least I was on the path to freedom. There was no turning back. I looked around my small apartment, which was simple but cozy. It was my space, my sanctuary. No one could hurt me here, and that gave me a deep sense of peace. This was where I could start fresh and rebuild. As I thought about Adam, I realized how much his own decisions had led us to this point. His mother's toxic influence had clouded his judgment, and in the end, he had pushed me away. It was sad, really, that he had let himself get caught up in someone else's views, but that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt something new stirring inside me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was stepping into a new phase of life, a phase where I could finally start living again. Tomorrow, I would be stronger, and the day after, even more so. This was just the beginning, and I knew I was ready for whatever came next. In the days that followed, I focused on my career with renewed energy. I threw myself into my work, becoming more involved in larger, more impactful marketing campaigns. My hard work didn't go unnoticed, and soon my network began to grow as I connected with influential people in the industry. I was invited to host webinars and lead workshops, showcasing my expertise and leadership skills. My career was taking off, and I felt proud of how far I had come. One busy Sunday morning, I was sitting at my desk reviewing campaign proposals when my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Glancing at the screen, I saw it was Amy, a well-known contact in the marketing world. "Hey, Lily," she greeted me warmly when I answered. "Hi, Amy. How's it going?" I replied, surprised but pleased to hear from her. "I've got a project I think you'd be perfect for," she said, excitement clear in her voice. "Are you free to chat about it later this week?" My heart skipped a beat. This was the kind of opportunity I had been working toward, and it felt like the next step in my journey to success. "Absolutely," I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite the excitement bubbling inside me. "I'd love to hear more." As I hung up the phone, I smiled to myself. I was moving forward both personally and professionally. The life I was building for myself was full of possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly excited for what the future held. There would still be challenges ahead, of course, but I was ready to face them. I was no longer the woman who had felt small and trapped in her marriage. I was stepping into a new chapter of my life, and I was determined to make the most of every opportunity that came my way. I heard through the grapevine about what you've been going through. I'm really sorry you had to deal with that, Amy said, her voice sympathetic but still professional. Thanks, Amy. It's been tough, but I'm managing, I replied, trying to stay composed. Listen, she continued, I've been thinking there's an opening for a speaker at a conference next month. The topic is resilience and leadership, and I believe your experience, both personal and professional, would really resonate with the audience. What do you think? The offer caught me off guard. I hadn't expected something like this, but I knew it was an opportunity one couldn't pass up. Speaking about resilience in front of an audience felt fitting after everything I had been through. I'd be honored, Amy. Thank you so much for thinking of me, I said, feeling a sense of pride. As my career continued to grow, so did my reputation. But with that growth, I also began to hear whispers about Adam. His behavior had not gone unnoticed, and soon enough, people in the industry were talking about it. The same people who once respected him were now distancing themselves. At an industry meetup one day, I overheard bits of a conversation between two executives. HEK looking for work again, one of them said, shaking his head. After what he did to Elle, who would hire him? The words stung, but they also felt like confirmation that I wasn't the only one who saw the damage Adam had caused. While my career was thriving, Adam was struggling. The roles had completely reversed. First, he tried to reach out to me several times, sending messages and asking for help, but I ignored them. Until one afternoon, I received a text that made me pause. Can we meet? I really need your help, Adam's message read. Against my better judgment, I agreed to a brief coffee meeting. I didn't know what to expect, but I wanted to hear what he had to say. When we met, Adam seemed like a shadow of his former self. His voice was low as he began, Lily, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I've lost so much. I can't find work anywhere. It's like all the doors are closed to me. I listened, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me felt sorry for him, but another part of me remembered everything that had happened. I'm not in a position to rewrite the past, Adam, I said softly but firmly. You made certain choices, and now you're facing the consequences of those choices. I know, but you could help me. You could talk to people, tell them I've changed, he pleaded. I shook my head gently. The professional community talks, Adam. People know what happened. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about the choices you made, and people see that. As I left the cafe, I felt a strange mixture of pity and resolve. Adam was learning a hard lesson, one about respect and the long-lasting consequences of his actions. It was a lesson he had brought upon himself, and there was nothing I could do to change that. Back at work, I threw myself into my projects with renewed energy. My experiences, as painful as they had been, were now a source of strength. I was determined to use them to help others. It was bittersweet realizing that sometimes the hardest personal trials could lead to the greatest professional triumphs. With my divorce finally finalized, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It was like I could finally exhale after holding my breath for so long. This new chapter of my life wasn't just about moving on. It was about taking everything I had learned and using it to fuel my future. At work, my role expanded beyond my usual responsibilities. I started a mentorship program for young women in marketing. I wanted to give back, to help others navigate the challenges I had faced, both in my career and in life. My own experiences of overcoming adversity drove me to create a space where these women could feel supported and empowered. One day during a mentorship session, I met Lauren, a bright and ambitious intern who reminded me a lot of myself at her age. She was eager to learn and filled with potential. During one of our conversations, she looked up at me with curiosity, her notebook in hand, ready to take notes. "Lily, how do you handle criticism, especially from people who think you don't belong?" she asked earnestly. Her question made me pause. I thought back to all the moments when I had been doubted or questioned, both in my personal life and in my career. The answer wasn't easy, but it was something I had learned through experience. You have to remember that criticism often says more about the person giving it than about you. I told her there will always be people who think you don't belong or who doubt your abilities, but it's up to you to prove them wrong by staying true to yourself and your goals. Don't let their opinions define you. You belong where you are, and the only person who needs to believe that is you. Lauren nodded, a thoughtful look crossing her face. "Thank you, Lily, that really helps." I smiled, feeling proud not only of the progress I had made in my own life, but also of the impact I could have on others. This was the new chapter I had worked so hard to create, and I was ready for whatever came next. I smiled at Lauren, encouraging her. You listen, you learn, and then you let your work speak for itself. Never let someone else's doubts become your reality. Instead, use those doubts as fuel to work even harder. Lauren nodded quickly, scribbling down notes. "But what if it gets really tough?" she asked, looking up at me. "Then you reach out," I said. "Lean on your network, find mentors, and never be afraid to ask for help. We're stronger together." I emphasized the importance of having support during challenging times. The mentorship program wasn't the only bright spot in my life. My social circle had also grown, and I was often invited to speak at industry events and social gatherings where I shared my story and the lessons I had learned. At one such event, a networking dinner for top marketing professionals, I was approached by Scott, a former colleague who had heard about my recent achievements. "Lily, I have to say, your talk was really inspiring," Scott said with admiration in his voice. "How do you keep pushing forward after everything?" "It's about not letting your past define your future," I replied, acknowledging his compliment. "Every challenge is just another stepping stone to something greater." As the evening went on, our conversation shifted from casual talk to a deeper discussion about potential collaborations. "Lily, have you ever thought about writing a book?" Scott suggested. "Your story could inspire so many people." The idea intrigued me. By the end of the night, I had exchanged contact information with a publisher who was also at the event. It seemed like every social interaction was opening new doors for me, a clear sign of how far I had come. I couldn't help but feel proud of the progress I had made both personally and professionally. As I continued to grow in my career, my confidence soared. I was leading workshops, running marketing campaigns, and becoming a voice for resilience and empowerment in the marketing world. Each speaking engagement and workshop wasn't just about sharing my knowledge, it was about healing myself. I was turning my past pain into lessons for others to learn from. After a long day filled with back-to-back events, I lay in bed one night, reflecting on just how much my life had transformed. I was no longer the woman sitting silently at that dinner table, suffering in silence. I had become a leader, a mentor, and a survivor. I had taken the difficult moments of my life and turned them into something meaningful. This wasn't just a new beginning for me. It was a vibrant continuation of a journey that I was proud to call my own. Months went by, and the memories of my past with Adam had faded into the background, overshadowed by the busy and fulfilling life I was living. I was focused on my future, and the echoes of that time were barely a whisper. But one afternoon, during a coffee meetup with Isabella, a mutual friend, those old echoes came back to life. "Lily," Isabella began cautiously, "Adam's been asking about you. He really struggling, says he regrets everything." I sipped my coffee, letting her words sink in. People often regret things when they start to feel the consequences of their actions. I replied calmly. "He wants to talk to you, maybe apologize." "He seems sincere," Isabella continued, looking at me with a mix of hope and concern. I thought about it for a moment, but then shook my head. "Isabella, I appreciate you telling me, but that part of my life is over. I've moved on," I said firmly. There was no room in my life for looking back. My focus was on the future, on the new opportunities and relationships I had built. Isabella nodded, understanding the finality in my words. We quickly changed the subject, leaving the past where it belonged, behind me. Adam tried to contact me via phone and messages, but I didn't want to go back to that period of my life. In actuality, I had already made great progress. I was surrounded by individuals who respected my development and encouraged me, and my life suddenly seemed full of possibilities. I was no longer the person who had been ensnared in an oppressive relationship years before. I had developed into a person who welcomed difficulties, flourished in the face of difficulty, and was unwavering in her will to keep going. When I went back, I saw that every challenge I had encountered had molded me into the person I am now. I knew I was just where I was supposed to be when I was leading with confidence and encouraging people at the forefront of my profession. I had the future to design and was prepared to embrace whatever lay ahead without looking back. I didn't waver in my resolve to maintain my distance. Adam reached out to me every time, but I said nothing. Not because I was angry, but rather because I had to look out for my own interests. I discovered through my experience how crucial it was to respect myself and set boundaries. The months that followed saw more advancements in my profession. I oversaw successful marketing campaigns, gave talks at conferences, and watched my mentorship program grow. I felt like I was having a genuine and satisfying influence. Others who were dealing with their own difficulties were motivated by my narrative, which I shared across several media. When I thought back on the previous year, I was struck by how dramatically I had changed one evening. I had flourished, not simply survived. I finally had achievement and a purpose in life. It didn't satisfy me to know that Adam felt bad about his decisions. Rather, it made me think about the grave repercussions of treating people disrespectfully. I felt so at ease as I closed my journal, which was chock full of ideas and introspection. I was thrust into a road of empowerment and success by my encounter with Adam. His remorse wasn't what won me over. Rather, it was my own strength, converting suffering into strength and leading a morally upright life. As we come to a close, please get in touch with me. Do you believe Lily made the proper decision to shut Adam out of her life? Please leave your comments below and remember to like and subscribe for more stories like this one if you liked it. My name is Carol, and I am currently 37 years old. I'll tell you about an interesting event I had and how I quickly dealt with it, since I'm not easily fooled. Surprisingly, before things went south, I got along well with my mother-in-law, unlike many of the stories I've heard. Our relationship was harmonious, warm, flawless, and based on respect for one another. Frank, my spouse, was not only my best friend, but also my partner in crime and the love of my life. Everything appeared to be picture perfect to me. This is neither a mistake or a misconception on my behalf. We did argue from time to time, just like any other family would, but nothing appeared out of the ordinary. But I was confused by the unexpected turn of events that transpired thereafter. Allow me to recount the event and explain my decision to exact revenge on my mother-in-law and spouse. I had taken Frank and myself on a vacation that I had initially planned as something special for our family. But I chose to include my widowed sister-in-law, Tiana, since I knew how lonely she was. I paid for the majority of the trip's expenses, including lodging, food, and activities. Their additional costs were exclusively Frank and Tiana's responsibility. Treating them to a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Spain meant discovering its colorful streets, indulging in tapas, and basking in the Mediterranean heat. I was enthusiastic at the prospect of improving our relationship and making enduring memories. I had no idea that this wonderful journey would set off a series of events that would rock the basis of trust and demolish the myth of our idyllic family. Rewinding to that fateful day, I stood in the living room with smiles on my face, holding travel tickets, full of promise and hope for our dreams of Spain. I gathered Tiana and Frank and told them about the surprise. With a look of puzzlement on their features, they looked at each other. Tiana cocked a small head tilt, her eyes wise. I hoped to see happiness and appreciation in their eyes as I gracefully handed them the tickets and explained about our upcoming trip to Spain. Frank's expression brightened, showing real excitement. "You really are something else, Carol," he said. I was filled with anticipation as I looked forward to our amazing voyage beginning. But Tiana's grin was kinder when she looked up into my eyes. "Oh my goodness, Carol, you've really beyond yourselves. This is an immeasurable gift. I'm really moved," she said. I felt a surge of pride and pleasure in my heart at that time. Their responses confirmed my feelings of love and work that went into this surprise. I had imagined that this trip would be the glue that would make our relationship stronger, strengthening the links that were already seemingly indestructible and producing priceless memories. But as you may have guessed, this story takes a dangerous turn. Beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect relationship, a convoluted web of treachery and deceit was waiting to trap us all. The unraveling of the truth would put the fundamental foundation of family ties to the test and push the boundaries of forgiveness. We got on the plane and started our 2-week journey as scheduled. As we immersed ourselves in the colorful streets and rich tapestry of Spanish culture, the excitement was evident. The first week passed smoothly, filled with dancing to the contagious rhythms of flamenco, exploring historic monuments, and savoring the tastes of paella. There was laughter and happiness in the air, and I felt proud to think that our relationship would never fail. But I had no idea that a storm was building up over the horizon, ready to pour its wrath down on my gullible heart. I awoke to an empty hotel room on a fateful Monday morning as the sun sent golden rays over the city. My heart was filled with confusion and a mounting sense of discomfort. I grabbed for my phone in a panic, calling Tiana's and my husband's phones in the hopes of getting an explanation. To my dismay, though, their voices and phones stayed silent. As I looked around the empty room for any indication of their presence, fear started to gnaw at the edges of my consciousness. There were no messages, no baggage, no signs of fight or disruptions, just an eerie quiet that hung thick in the air. The minutes seemed to drag on forever as hopelessness threatened to overwhelm me. It seemed like I was abandoned in a strange and alien world. A ray of hope broke through the obscurity. There was a buzz on my phone, indicating a new call. It was Tiana. I felt a wave of relief that was mixed with bewilderment and intense hurt. How could she walk away silently? I took the phone with apprehension, my voice full of a mixture of doubt and worry. "Where are you, Tiana? What took place?" I inquired. I heard Tiana's voice. It was tinted with a peculiar combination of frustration and resignation. It was not, though, the same lovely voice I had known my whole life. It sounded more icy. Carol, my phone was ringing nonstop, so I thought I should return your call. I apologize for upsetting you. Simply put, I wanted to know where you two went. I was worried that something horrible had happened because your suitcases aren't here. The next thing she said, with a callousness that struck me, was, "We left you." But why? What happened? I couldn't bear to spend another week in your company, so I had to leave. Did I do something wrong? Yes. I mean, how could you be so dense? Excuse me. You sprung up this trip on me, practically forcing me to go with you. I couldn't remain disingenuous any longer. Let me spell it out clearly for you, Carol. I don't enjoy your company. Sure, we can spend a couple of hours together at a family event, but 2 weeks. I tried to be civil and grace you with my presence for as long as I could. Turns out I could only master 1 week with you before I lost my mind. I'm sorry, but I'm on the way to the airport with Frank right now. We can't be around you any longer. Shock reverberated through my core as the revelation struck me like a bolt of lightning, unraveling the threads of trust I had so naively woven. How could our seemingly unbreakable bond crumble beneath the weight of unspoken grievances? Questions flitted through my mind as I grappled with this harsh reality. What had I done wrong? What exactly did I do to deserve such harshness? How did things escalate to this point? Was there no chance for reconciliation? Confusion and heartache intertwined within me, the pain of betrayal seeping deep into my soul. I didn't know you felt this way, Tiana, honestly, and you had no reason to. I'd always led you to assume that things were fine and dandy between us. Why not bring that up? Why not sit me down so that we could hash out whatever problem there was between us? Because if I'm being honest, I still don't know what I've done to wrong you. That's the thing. I just can't put my finger on it, but you just irked me. What? That's the most childish thing I've ever heard. You can't stand me just because of some inexplicable irk. Grow up, Tiana. I thought I offended you or something, but I didn't do anything wrong, right? Not necessarily, but it doesn't matter. What matters is how I feel about you, and I feel that you're annoying, and I just can't stand being around you. If that's the case, then why did you say yes to coming with us on this trip? Because it was a free trip to Spain. No one is going to turn down that opportunity. But as the days went by, I grew more and more tired of your antics. What antics, Tiana? What did I do that was so bad that you decided to leave me all alone in a foreign country? She failed to answer, and I grew more impatient with this impromptu disdain coming out of nowhere. I was shocked, hurt, confused, and angry. But most of all, I was just sad. I had to inquire about my beloved husband and what he had to say in all of this. Let me speak to Frank. Casually and easily, Tiana passed the phone on to Frank, assuming someone likely Frank was eavesdropping on the entire conversation. He responded with the same indifference and coldness as his mother. Hello, really, Frank. You decided to leave me too. I didn't leave you because I don't like you. I left because my mom needed me to take her home. So you knew about all of this. How long have you known about your mother's apparent hatred towards me? For some time now. I was hoping this trip would bring her closer to you, but I was wrong. Okay, but what I'm failing to understand is why none of you approached me about this. We're all adults, meaning if there's an issue, we solve it. It's not like we haven't had arguments in the past. We sat down and solved those arguments. What's different about this time? Frank failed to answer, mirroring his mother's earlier silence. The only thing I can safely conclude about this entire stupid debacle is that your mother hates me for a silly reason, which she knows isn't valid. Maybe she's jealous of me or something. Maybe I have something she can't have, and she knows she can't speak up about it without sounding foolish. So she's beating around the bush. Am I correct in assuming that? Their resounding silence affirmed my assumption. Well, I can say that I'm honestly shocked. I didn't know that you two felt this way about me. I hope you have a safe flight back home. I cut the call, pacing around the hotel room, still trying to understand the issue. As I contemplated whether I deserved this treatment, I realized that 37 years on this planet had taught me that sometimes people hate for no apparent reason, driven by jealousy or bitterness. It's not uncommon, but the last people I expected this behavior from were my own family. After sobbing for some time, I had an epiphany, taking me back to the moment when I decided to take control of my destiny and seek vengeance against those who wronged me without cause. It was a pivotal moment that would forever change the course of my life. Wiping away my tears, a newfound determination welled up within me. I refused to waste any more precious emotions on their actions. It was time to show them they couldn't trample over my heart and get away with it. With trembling fingers, I dialed my childhood friend Arlo's number. Knowing I could trust him with my day, cautiously asked if he could assist me in my quest for justice. Arlo, always the loyal and mischievous friend, listened intently, his voice filled with a mix of concern and excitement, reassuring me that he had my back. Carol, my dear friend, you're a force to be reckoned with, and you know you can count on me for anything and everything. So what are you planning on doing? Well, Arlo, you know how your construction company always has excess sawdust. Yes, it can be quite a hassle to get rid of sometimes. I believe I've found the perfect use for it. His curiosity piqued as I unraveled my plan like a carefully crafted script, detailing how we would execute the ultimate act of retaliation. Bags of sawdust would be delivered to Tiana's house, infiltrating every corner and crevice, leaving an indelible mark of chaos and betrayal. Arlo couldn't help but smile at the brilliance of my idea, a subtle yet impactful reminder to Tiana of the stress she had unleashed upon my life. Armed with Arlo's expertise and my newfound determination, we set our plan into motion. The question arose, how would we get inside the house before they returned? You need to get the spare key hidden under the potted plant on the patio, then you'll be in. Wow, you thought of everything, huh? I'm not one to be played with. I think I'm a reasonable woman, but if they want to go lower and act childish, then I'll go even lower. Atta girl. As the hours passed, anticipation swirled within me. Arlo assured me that the mission was complete, and soon I would witness the fallout of our carefully orchestrated chaos. Then, like a sweet melody in my ear, my phone chimed with a message from Arlo. I eagerly opened the pictures he had sent, revealing a sight to behold. Tiana's once pristine home now resembled a post-apocalyptic wasteland, drowned in a sea of sawdust. Every nook and cranny had been touched by our mischievous hands, a scene straight out of a surrealistic painting, an embodiment of the chaos that had unfolded in our lives. I called Arlo, and his laughter echoed through the phone. I couldn't help but join in. It was a cathartic release, a shared moment of triumph against those who had betrayed me. I expressed my heartfelt gratitude to Arlo, acknowledging his willingness to tread the path of mischief with me. He simply said, "Naughty can be so satisfying, my friend." As the clock ticked away, I could feel the tension building within me. How would Frank and Tiana react when they walked through the doors of their once-beloved home? The anticipation was almost unbearable, a heady mix of nerves and vindication. I couldn't help but relish the thought of their bewildered faces and disarrayed emotions. Hours later, my phone erupted with frantic energy. It was Frank, his voice laced with panic and disbelief, as he described the chaotic scene that awaited them, the sawdust-covered house standing as a testament to their betrayal. My heart danced with wicked delight as I listened to his exasperated voice. At that moment, I knew that the message had been received loud and clear. Their actions had consequences, and the chaos they had sown had come back to haunt them. Carol, it's just awful. Mom is in hysterics. I decided to reveal the part I played in this and said, "It serves both of you right. How could you leave me here alone without a valid reason, no less?" "Wait, Carol, was this your doing?" The wailing and panic in the background stopped, and instead, I approached Frank's phone. I heard my mother-in-law say, "Give me that." Before shouting in my ear, "How could you do this to us? To me? I have no idea what you're talking about. Have you considered that this is just your karma?" "Oh, come on, Carol. We all know it was you. Who else would have access to my home?" It's very easy to break into someone's home nowadays, Tiana, especially if you don't have any security cameras installed, which, by the way, you should seriously consider doing to prevent things like this from happening again. Honestly, Carol, how can you do this to us? When are we supposed to sleep? This sawdust is making my lungs ache. Oh, that's right. You probably forgot to get the keys to my house, huh? Well, that's a shame. I'm guessing you two are going to have to stay in yet another hotel. But for how long? Until I decide to come back from my vacation, I guess. I mean, I paid for 2 weeks, after all, and who knows? I might feel greedy and decide to extend my stay. Frank then took the phone from Tiana, and she began to bawl once again, mourning her ruined furniture. "Carol, this was foul. How could you do this? I'm not sure why you think that I'm involved in this at all. How, after all, could I? I'm lounging in the hotel's jacuzzi right now. How am I able to accomplish this?" The two of them were plainly perplexed about what had transpired, so I suppressed my laughing. They didn't have any concrete evidence, but they suspected me, which I plainly did, of being involved in it. I thus reveled in the knowledge that they were irritated, but had nowhere to vent their rage. A wave of satisfaction swept over me as I hung up the phone to say goodbye to Frank. I had seized charge of my story, leaving them to deal with the fallout from what they had done. Knowing Tiana's age, I knew what I did was disgusting and maybe harmful. I mean, staying in that place for even one night might have detrimental effects on one's health. However, I was aware that they wouldn't dare consider remaining there. It was too much tampered with to be livable. All they could do was depend on spending a little more time at a hotel. I spent that extra week in Spain, taking in the culture as I had planned, since I didn't want my money to go to waste. My mother-in-law and husband were probably apprehensive about finding a cleaning service that would take on such a difficult assignment. My mother-in-law would have to remain with us at my house while the house was being professionally cleaned, but I had no idea how long that would take. Given that she seemed to have canceled our meeting, I knew she would be agitated the whole time. Some of you should be reminded by this that not everyone has to learn the hard way. Furthermore, by all means, administer your own justice if the situation calls for it. Give them something truly to be angry about. The worst kept secrets. Once I had shared my entire being and explained the horrible betrayal. I'm Rachel Harris, and today marks my 33rd birthday. I live with my 3-year-old husband, Adam, and our 7-year-old son, Peter. We 3 make up our family. My spouse and I are attending a friend's wedding today. I just know them by face, and even though I call them friends, they're really more like Adam's pals. I'm in awe of how opulent the luxury hotel where the wedding is being held is. I moved aside to use the toilet as Adam met folks he recognized. "Oh, look at that defective person," was said in a nasty voice as I made my way back to the ceremony. Why are they present at all? I wondered, What? Regarding whom were they speaking to? I could hear the folks around me talking loudly enough to hurt my feelings. No one addressed me personally, but it was obviously a hurtful rumor that wasn't just that. I left because I didn't want to put up with such impolite behavior. I heard someone yell, "Hey, ugly," out of nowhere. Are you unable to hear me? I strolled on, ignoring it. It wasn't my name, and I wasn't going to let them get to me. But then I heard footsteps behind me move quickly. Someone grabbed my arm forcefully, and it hurt before I understood what was going on. "Hold on, I'm speaking with you," said a lady. I withdrew my arm and gave her a glance. She made a theatrical gesture as she staggered back. With a sidelong glance at me, another woman hurried over to assist her. "Lauren, how are you doing?" She glared at me and said, "Why are you being so harsh?" "What's going on, Who are you?" Confused, I asked. She angrily said, "Who am I? I mean, you truly don't remember me. How impolite." She raised an eyebrow in astonishment at my question. "What? What topic are you discussing? With only a high school certificate, do you really believe you have the right to act like this? I am Lauren, your sister, in case you have forgotten. Does anyone recognize that name? Our mother is shown here. Is it true that you have forgotten your own mother?" I gave it some thinking and gave a little nod. I didn't want to waste time having a meaningful conversation with someone who could have had the same name as me in the past. They were much more enraged by my reaction. 3 males rushed over at that time. "What is happening?" The yelling from over there was audible to us. "Lauren, are you not prepared yet? You're still dressed normally." "You have to get ready for the wedding," said one of them, who she named Dad. Lauren exclaimed, "This person," then pointed at me. "This dubious individual broke into our wedding. Take her out of here immediately." The 3 men had somewhat different reactions. The person she addressed as Papa gave me a wide-eyed and obviously displeased expression. With a pale face, the other man, Noah, froze in disbelief. "Why is Rachel present on this joyous day?" With a wavering voice, Noah inquired. "She must have entered unintentionally. It is really intolerable. Make a security call, please." "Hold on, take note of what you say." With a pallid face, Noah added hastily, "This individual is." Noah attempted to step in while the man known as Dad agreed with Lauren. "You really know nothing," I whispered under my breath, but nobody seemed to hear. Adam suddenly materialized. "Rachel, you are there. I have been trying to find you." Everybody looked at him. "Sorry, I got caught up with some strange people on my way back," I remarked with a little smile. I took a step toward Adam. He made a rapid assessment and immediately grasped the problem. Lauren's expression shifted as she noticed me standing next to Adam and giving me a furious glare. Her parents appeared to be perplexed and unable to completely comprehend what was going on. The first to speak was a flustered Noah. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harris. My spouse made a rude comment. I also sincerely apologize to your wife." "Come on, Lauren, you ought to apologize too," Noah remarked. "What makes me need to apologize?" Lauren retaliated by pointing at me once again. "It's her that needs to apologize." This impolite individual walked into our wonderful day. She's a disgrace to our family. I have no idea how she got here. We ought to have severed our relationship with her long ago and never seen her again. "Hold on, family." Noah glanced from Lauren to me, seeming astonished. At that moment, the trio known as Dad and Mom intervened. "Oh, Noah, we apologize so much. Our oldest daughter is challenging. It's awkward to bring her up at all. We've been able to hide it for this long. 10 years ago, we threw her out of the house. How in the world did she learn about Lauren's nuptials? What is her purpose for visiting without permission? Is she really not attempting to sabotage the wedding? Mom went on. Noah, she's not that smart after all. She did not get into college. She simply completed high school. After that, she was just a burden, doing part-time jobs and remaining at home. She resembled an infestation. She ought to be appreciative of our help getting her through high school. So why did she sneak into the wedding? Even though they treated me badly, I had cut ties with them a long time ago and didn't care about their insults. These people were technically my family, at least on paper, but my parents had always favored my younger sister, who was 7 years younger than me, and had ignored me for as long as I could remember. My father's family had been doctors for generations, and our home was also a clinic. My mother worked there as a nurse. To outsiders, our family probably looked like we had everything we needed, but in reality, it was a toxic home. I remember trying hard to win my parents' love when I was young, but I eventually gave up because their favoritism towards my sister made no sense to me. She was seen as attractive, and I was not. Luckily, though it might sound strange, I was smart and did well in school, so I focused on my studies, aiming to leave home as soon as I could. Back then, I felt like I was just playing the part of the defective older sister in the family. I won't allow you to go to university. You're a defect by nature, and there's no way you could get in. Start working right after high school, become independent, and contribute financially to the house. You should be grateful we even raised someone as unattractive as you. You owe us for that. As for college expenses, we'll consider it for Lauren, but there's not a single cent for you. You'll spend your life serving us. Even if you get a job, it won't be anything important. This is what my parents told me during my senior year of high school. I actually recorded that conversation, along with many other times they verbally abused me or acted irrationally, and I still have those recordings today. My sister, Lauren, also treated me poorly, following our parents' example. She would often mock me, trying to prove she was better. I'm going to become a doctor and take over Dad's job in the future. I'll work hard enough for both of us, since my big sister can't. Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, learn from her mistakes. And do your best, Lauren. Don't worry. We'll support you fully. Unlike your sister, you're truly our pride. They would have conversations like this right in front of me as if I wasn't there. It felt like watching a bad play. After high school, I worked different part-time jobs for about 4 years. I still lived at home even though they called me a burden. They wouldn't let me leave because they wanted to use me when it suited them. But secretly, I rented an apartment. Even though my family kept saying, "We won't forgive you if you do this," or "We won't allow that," I realized after turning 16 that I didn't need their permission anymore. Of course, there were challenges, like needing a guarantor for some things, but I made it work. I also intentionally reported less income for my part-time job so they couldn't demand much money from me. I started investing, slowly building up my savings. When Lauren was preparing for her high school entrance exams, she claimed she couldn't concentrate with me around, and I was kicked out of the house. My parents probably thought I'd come crawling back, but for me, it was the perfect chance to finally be independent. They must have been surprised that I, the daughter they thought was incapable, never returned. But soon it didn't matter to them. For my parents, having Lauren was enough. Now 10 years have passed since then. I overheard a heated argument between Lauren and a man named Noah. Today was their wedding day, so now they're married, although my sister's name was on the invitation. I didn't think much of it at the time because I had already lost interest in this family. Why are you taking her side? I've been saying she's suspicious. Just her being here ruins the mood. Kick her out, Lauren demanded. Noah replied, I've told you several times I invited these people. People you even checked the invitations with me. Remember, they're official guests, so you should apologize for what you said earlier. Hearing this argument so close to their wedding was unsettling. Just then, my father suddenly looked surprised and said, "Wait, isn't he the son of the head of Harris General Hospitals?" My mother was equally surprised. Harris General Hospital? The famous one. He's the son of the head doctors, Lauren added, shocked. In the middle of their stares, he introduced himself with a smile. "Nice to meet you. I'm Adam Harris, and this is my wife, Rachel." Adam's parents are well-known doctors who have managed a hospital for years, and Adam is being trained to follow in their footsteps. Hearing this, my parents were amazed. Noah then spoke up. "It's unbelievable. But to think that Dr. Harris' wife is my wife's sister. What a coincidence. That means we're related now." Unable to hide his surprise, Noah apologized. "Dr. Harris, I'm sorry if my son has caused any trouble." Before he could say more, I cut him off. My sister's husband, Noah Schnapp, is a doctor and works at a university hospital. I took my son to see him recently because he wasn't feeling well, but that's all. Adam has many connections with doctors, and it seems Noah respects Adam a lot. Noah then asked, "How's our feeling now?" Based on my diagnosis, he should start treatment right away. I suggest you take him to my hospital for tests and hospitalization. Although Noah was kind in his offer, I replied, "Actually, we've decided to get a second opinion from another doctor. It's important to be sure." Noah looked surprised by my response. I sensed that he wanted to treat my son as a special case, but I was uncomfortable with the idea of my child being seen as just another opportunity for profit. I politely declined his offer with a smile. But suddenly, a mocking laugh echoed through the room. "Why are you acting like that? Are you trying to make up for being a high school graduate by marrying a doctor? You think marrying the heir of a big hospital makes you better? You're still the same. Your education hasn't changed, and you think too simply. You actually have a child." "Poor kid, with you as his mother," Lauren sneered. "Hey, Lauren, please stop. We're family. Why do you keep saying such things?" Noah tried to calm her down, but Lauren glared at him, standing firm in her opinion. Then Adam spoke. "Rachel, are these people really your family?" he asked with doubt. "No," I replied. "They can't be called family anymore. A real family wouldn't suddenly scold you for no reason or refuse to feed you just because you spilled a little food. They wouldn't give me old, second-hand clothes they found in a dumpster while laughing and comparing them to the fancy clothes they gave my sister. They wouldn't throw away my school materials saying I'm too stupid to need them or ruin my textbooks by soaking them in water." I continued, "A real family wouldn't strip you naked in the winter for not lending a book to your sister or lock you in a hot shed in the summer. They wouldn't sell your belongings behind your back or tell you directly that you're expected to work for them for life. People in town noticed the unfair way the clinic treated us and suspected abuse. It's no surprise no one takes their kids to their clinic anymore. It's amazing no one reported it when we were younger. Now their business is failing, and they don't even realize it's their fault." As I calmly revealed the cruel things from my past, Noah looked shocked. My parents were equally stunned when they realized I knew about the clinic's financial struggles. Since I left, my in-laws had discovered this information while investigating. Deeply sympathizing with what I went through, Adam felt the same and had looked into my parents' clinic, possibly as a form of justice. Lauren interrupted, shouting, "Stop it. Stop lying. We didn't do any of that. It's your fault for being a failure, Noah. Don't believe her." But it was too late. Noah looked at her with disdain. I thought to myself, none of this would have happened if she had just ignored me and walked away back then. But then Noah spoke up. No, actually, it's you who's lying. Me? Lying about what? Lauren responded in disbelief. That Mrs. Harris only graduated high school. She has a college degree, is a successful businesswoman, and the CEO of a company that provides food for hospitals, including ours, Noah explained. CEO? My sister gasped in shock, staring at me like she couldn't believe it. My parents looked just as surprised. Stop lying. She's just a high school graduate. Are you saying she went to college behind our backs without us knowing? My mother accused. Yes, I did go to college, I replied calmly. I was already an adult, and I didn't need to tell strangers who aren't my family. What are you saying? How can you speak to your parents like that? We didn't give you permission to go to college. My father shouted. Why would I need your permission? I replied calmly, and they couldn't hide their anger. After high school, I worked various jobs and saved a good amount of money. I used that money to pay for college because there was still so much I wanted to learn and achieve. Living on my own gave me freedom, and I proved I could do anything. While in college, I started my own business. That's also when I met my husband. Looking back, it fills me with a lot of emotion. Meanwhile, my sister mumbled to herself, her face pale. I can't believe it. I always thought she was the useless sister who couldn't do anything on her own, that she would be nothing after being kicked out. But she graduated from college, became a CEO, and married the heir of a major hospital. Why? I thought I would be the successful one. Why is she more successful than me? Why does she look happy? Why indeed? I replied, maybe it's because despite being treated unfairly, I never gave up and kept working hard. Maybe luck helped a little too. I looked at my sister firmly, then revealed something shocking. By the way, I heard you dropped out of middle school. Is that true? This revelation left everyone, including my parents and Noah, completely stunned. What? What are you talking about? Who dropped out of middle school? My sister snapped back. Though I admired her attempt to deny it, I continued. I heard from a distant relative, someone who has always been kind to us. When I left home, you thought you could easily get into a top school without studying. You went into the exam unprepared and ended up writing almost nothing, which led to you failing as expected. After that, you started acting out at home and shut yourself away for a long time. You only came back into society when our parents introduced Noah as a suitable husband for you. As I spoke, Noah's face grew more serious while my parents and sister turned pale. The information came from a distant cousin on my father's side, who is known for being good at gathering details. Though we only met a few times when I was a child, he looked after me and even acted as my guarantor. You're lying. What are you talking about? My sister protested, trembling. But I continued. Actually, the claim that you work in medical administration is also false, isn't it? In reality, you don't have the qualifications, and you're only doing basic tasks, not handling any real responsibilities. At least some professional ethics are being followed. Stop it. You're lying. All of it is false, she cried out. Maybe, I replied calmly. What I heard was just a rumor. Whether you believe it or not is up to you. At that, my sister quickly turned to Noah, studying his face. He looked doubtful, confused, and clearly disappointed. Lauren, you told us you graduated from a prestigious women's university, had qualifications, and were helping with your family's hospital. Was that all a lie? Falsifying your academic background is fraud. Have you deceived me? Noah asked her directly. No, Noah. Don't just believe her. You're my husband. You should trust me. she pleaded. Then name even one professor from the university you claim to have graduated from, he challenged her. Flustered, my sister struggled to respond. That's not important right now. Really? Well, let's call a professor from the department you said you attended. They're also a family friend and know us well, Noah proposed, ready to find out the truth. As he said this, Noah calmly picked up his phone. Please stop. That's not necessary, Noah, she pleaded, panicking. You trust me. That's enough. Lauren suddenly snatched Noah's phone from his hand and slammed it onto the floor. There's no need to check. Just believe me, she shouted. Fueled by anger, she stomped on the phone with her high heels over and over, completely destroying it. Her face twisted in rage, almost like a monster, shocking Noah and everyone around. My parents tried to calm her down, but her anger wouldn't subside. The scene caught the attention of other guests and staff, who gathered around concerned. The venue turned chaotic with this sudden outburst. Even though I was there, it felt like I was watching from a distance. I no longer felt any connection to my sister or my parents. My family now was just my husband and son. Shall we go home? I think we've done our part here, I said to Adam. He looked a little surprised and asked, Are we leaving already? Rachel, I smiled calmly. It's okay, let's go. Oh, and let's stop by the cake shop in this hotel and get some cake. I heard there's one that's really popular right now. Adam smiled and agreed. That sounds like a good idea. Let's pick up a cake on the way home. We laughed lightly as we departed the arena. Subsequently, I learned that Noah was named in a lawsuit for billing patients excessive amounts and providing incorrect diagnosis. After that, I was approached by my ex-parents who were having a lot of financial difficulties and wanted my assistance. They showed up at the hospital where Adam works, wanting to see us, not knowing how to get in touch with me. She's the hospital heir's daughter-in-law. She's our daughter, let's see her now. They yelled at the reception, stirring up a commotion. But it was my parents-in-law who answered, not Adam or myself. They questioned, What business do you have with our daughter? With a hard gaze. Clearly uneasy, my parents turned and hurried out of the hospital. After that, they made many attempts to get in touch, but they never gave any thought to solving their own issues. Their hospital eventually had to shut. I was largely indifferent when I learned that my parents' hospital was closing. Rather, I had a feeling of relief, as if they were at last taking responsibility for their deeds. For me, it was one of the most revitalizing experiences. I found out later that Noah and Lauren were no longer together. Their marriage had lasted just a few months, so I was taken aback. Their relationship had to have suffered greatly as a result of the case Noah was involved in, and his termination from the hospital. Lauren kept making poor choices, but she always seemed driven to surpass me and achieve more happiness. Her first error was assuming that having an affair with a married doctor who was older would help her advance in her career. However, the doctor's wife became involved when the affair was revealed and demanded payment. Lauren, in a desperate attempt to get assistance, went to our parents, who rejected her and called her a shame to the family. She had suffered since failing her high school admission tests, and I'm not sure what happened to her after that. She had also been living alone at home for a considerable amount of time. After working in dubious environments, she endured several challenges that negatively impacted her health and ultimately led to her homelessness. I became entirely disinterested in her after hearing these stories. My ex-parents, who are getting close to retirement, are having difficulty finding work as nurses or doctors. Due to their negative reputation, which most likely results from the way they handled me and other people in the past, no hospital will hire them. These days, they are only memories, and I don't give them any thought. Regarding my kid, I'm pleased to report that, following an evaluation at another hospital, he no longer requires hospitalization, and with the appropriate medicine, has seen significant improvement in his health. I'll keep doing all in my power to keep my family safe.